right, welcome back. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Andrei Radulescu, Chief Engineer, Passenger Car Valve Actuation at Eaton Corporation. Come on up. Welcome.
Thank you, Amy. In the last day or so, we learned a lot about the design reviews, about lesson learned, and I have news for you. It's not done. I have one more, so bear with me. I turned in the presentation to talk about Eaton experience, and I forgot that maybe I am the only one who knows a lot about Eaton, right? And I want to share just a few words about our company, just to put you on stage with what's happening here. So Eaton Corporation, power management corporation, and we manage power. We manage electrical power to our electrical division. We manage hydraulic power and mechanical power. And about $20 billion sales last year. We are producing and selling in 175 countries, and about 100,000 people are my co-workers. So let's move into Auros and design reviews. And through my 22 years experience at Eaton, I participated in many design reviews. And I've seen consistent themes, right? As design reviews are performed all over the world, we operate with engineering centers on 4 continents. We've seen very inconsistent process. We also seen that we have to learn the lesson learned again and again. Something that we thought it's learned in US needs to be learned again in Asia, and vice versa. And we also learned that in a design review process, each team is kind of presenting what they want. And they start with a good, right? And then we have issues. Maybe you don't, but we do. And we leave very little time to discuss the issues. And the design review, it's a forum, a unique forum where in a span of a few hours, you have all the brains that the organization can provide in one room. And the design review, it's meant to work on the issues, right? To find solution and to exchange opinions. So we had a vision. And that vision was to change the conversation in a design review process. And that's what I'm going to talk about. You have the agenda on the left, and then the outcome, if you are not patient, it's on the right. So let's move on. Eaton has a lengthy experience with Auros. Maybe like an organization, we heard a question earlier, how long will it take for an organization to implement Auros? Well, it took us a while. It started in 2016 with one group, more like writing CAPEX, and was almost like a silo exercise. So not all the organization know about what's going on. And then the conference in 2019 happened, where more Eaton members were participating in that. And the seed of this tool was infused in more than a few people. So we come back to our organization and we start capturing knowledge. We start writing CAPEX. And we thought we write good CAPEX, right? Some were good, some were junk. We discarded at the end. But then, passing this forming stage, we went into expansion stage. We needed a sponsor, right? Some people are saying, management is a sponsor. Others, it's top-down design. I like saying sponsor. Sponsor is the one that has a carrot and a stick. And at Eaton, we needed both. So the design review was the first project that we implemented in Auros. We seen the value of that. We sold the value to the management. And with their carrot and stick approach, they drove that process across the vehicle group, which I represent here. That was a key decision in our process. And then that design review was more or less mandated to our VG. So non-design review within the vehicle group can be performed without Auros. And I'm going to talk about how we perform the design review in a few slides. So that was the expansion phase, but we look in the future, right? And as we approach the goals for 2024, right, we see that Auros can be implemented further. We have some seed projects that I can say was a bottom-up approach, where members of the organization seeing that Auros can be implemented in more than a design review process. So that's one phase. The second, as we have many tools in our development process, we want to connect Auros with those tools, to have tools where have a hook to grab an Auros assessment. We have tools where we can grab, Auros CAPEX. And then finally, right, as vehicle group, it's about 40% of Eaton overall. We want to extend the use of Auros through the entire Eaton enterprise. And for that, right, we need also visibility as the very top of our organizations. So how we did the design review in the past and how we are doing it now. Like many companies in the past, right, we rely on a PowerPoint to be the master format, right? And we drag a lot of information in that PowerPoint. We have the design review requirement maps, what to present. We have the tools from the FMEA, right? The design analysis plan, the test reports from the DVPNR. We have actions. We have the ADs, fracas, you name it. And we have the lesson learned, right? And we finish up, right, with engineering standard works, right? Every designer knows us very well that you have engineering standard works for everything, right? So was good, but was not efficient. In a design review, was pulling information from everywhere. Everything was a snapshot in time, right? Was on a PowerPoint, and even if you can migrate, from PowerPoint to a database to get some evidence and, some relevant information, that took time, right? So starting in about 2021, we used Auros as the main source for the design review. That means we have assessments in Auros, I'm going to show next. And assessment, it's pooling, the information from what I say, source of truth, excuse me. So if you have a DVPNR or design analysis plan where you have the evidence, this evidence is attached in an Auros assessment. When things are not going well, you have actions in Auros and you track this action through Auros for completions. Obviously, we discuss the pass-fail through the compliance state. And one of my managers was saying in a design review, we start with the red. We discuss the red first, right? And then if we have time, we go to the green. But the red is what we need to discuss and what we need to solve. Is it red? Was it red on other projects? Do we have actions? And do everybody knows what to do to turn this red into a green? Each project is organized in a team board, right? So this is a master assessment. I'm sorry about the small text there. And on the top, we have the development stages, right? Stage 1, think about the concept review. And then stage 5, you are ready for production. And each stages are separated with gates, right? At the gate, right, the organization makes decision about steering this project, moving ahead or no, holding that back. And we have a bunch of assessment there. All the way from the left, we have the modeling assessments that grabs information about what analytical tool we use. Are those tools adequate for the process? Do we have the right templates for that? The templates, they correlate the results with test results, so it's trusted data. And then also, who is going to do the analysis? You need the subject matter experts identified for those competencies. We do have design for environment, like each organization. We are conscient about the impact of our product to the environment, and we track that through the assessment. The black box, design analysis plan, voice of customer, and traceability, it's a good tool to track how you measure against the customer requirements. Usually we are tier 1 or tier 2 to the engine OEMs. So we need to be in tune with delivering what's needed and find the gaps. And we've seen with Auros assessment, that's an easy way to keep this track. The design review map are the set of questions required for each of the design review. You see a lot of blue boxes there, right, for each stage, right? Those are management questions that ask about the needed requirements, the completion requirements for those assessments. And then finally, we cannot end up without the lesson learned, right? It's a bucket where if you learn something, you throw it in a COP, and then through attributes like any other CAPEX, we pull those in assessments. So that's how we do it, right, through the attributes. When we have a big number of CAPEX, hundreds of CAPEX for each group, right, you need to rely on a smart filtering to see what CAPEX belong to each assessment. And we are using, rightly or wrongly, attributes based on a product line, based on a function, to pull those CAPEX into the assessment. And then it's going, to a manual filter, right, by the lead engineer. Do I have impact, for example, in my valve train? You keep that CAPEX. If you don't, you discard it. You either reduce the assessment by pulling the CAPEX out, or you put it non-applicable. We have about 8 product groups in VG, right? And made a pie chart there, more for internal awareness. But our portfolio is pretty vast, right? Starting from the 12 o'clock, we have the poppet valves, the engine valves. We make this for 100 years or so, a lot of knowledge. Then going clockwise, we have the boosting, right? Supercharger, EGR pumps. We have the clutch division. And then about half of the pie there, it's related with valve train, from commercial vehicle to passenger vehicles, right? It's a big pie there, big chart. I made that chart, so it was fair share to put my biggest portion there. And then the fuel emission group, the differentials, transmissions, it's the last one. So I counted about a week ago 41 projects that had Auros as the main tool for design reviews. So we do this work, right? And what are the benefits for what we've seen in doing Auros? And I'm listing about 4 of those. First, like you heard a lot today and yesterday, right? Lesson learned, right? And mistakes. And, somebody said earlier, I believe it was from Navistar, that we're never gonna eliminate ADs or 5Es, right? So mistakes are smarter than people, right? That's why we have it all the time, right? What's important, it's to learn from that mistake, right? So that's the first one. The second one, it's not to do the same mistake twice, right? And we use the CAPEX and assessments, in several ways, right? In step 5 of our corrective action, right, it's prevent reoccurrence. And there are a number of documents that needs to be updated, right, to prevent reoccurrence. And one of the requirement is to create a CAPEX that addressing the root cause of that. So that's mandatory. You cannot close the AD without completing this step. But you don't need to get into a painful AD or corrective action, right? we learn every time. Sometimes we learn very early, right, in CV, and we might not go to an AD, but it's a learning that we need to capture. And that's why we encourage, team members to create CAPEX every time when, the outcome is different than our intention, right? So that's a lesson learned. CAPEX are structured into COP, communique of practice. Each group has its COP. But the good thing is that you can search in somebody else's folder, right? So I can go from valve train to look what supercharger CAPEX are, differential, you name it, and see that if they have some lessons that I can learn from that, right? And we can use the filters a lot and your keywords, and it's popping up. Another thing that we like is that the CAPEX are a live library, right? They have a revision control, and when something is changing, either that the CAPEX was updated or a new CAPEX that fit your searching criteria through the attributes was added to the library, you have in the upper right corner, right, the exclamation mark says in your assessment something changed, right? So you better pay attention. You can open that, and it's giving you the number of CAPEX that changed or was added to the library, and you can make your determination what to do. You can ignore it, or you can re-evaluate your assessment, right? I think the term that Auros is using is re-execute, right? On the assessment page in the middle, right, you see some arrows there that are pointing that a new version of the CAPEX, right, exists, right? So when that assessment was created was, I don't know, V1, and, the assessor executed the assessment based on V1. But as I mentioned, now a version 2, it's in a system, right? So the user can look into, what's new in a version 2 and make the determination, should he or she use the version 2. The second benefit I mentioned earlier, reduced variation. And reduced variation, it's not on a product variation, it's more on a design review variation. I mentioned earlier that we have engineering center just in valve train in 4 locations all over the world. And I mentioned that, I seen, that each group presented, a little differently. And a little differently, it's not based on product line, but based on a structure for the design review. Now we have a design review map, right? So each group has to use the same methodology for the design review. The blue boxes I mentioned, they are more of the management of the design review, so they are absolutely the same across the organization. But assessment on a different boxes, are applicable for each product line, right? So maybe assessment for valve train will be different than assessment for differentials or for transmissions. Each organization is facing the same challenge, right? Knowledge retention. And it's either people move or retire. We have the same pain that, before somebody is leaving us, we basically need to squeeze his brain and transfer all the valuable information to somebody else, right? And it's a painful process, not very effective, right? But as you build the CAPEX and knowledge as you go, right, and you build up this inventory, right, that pain is reduced, right? And that works very well across the time zones, across language barriers, right? So we see that the CAPEX library is growing naturally, right? You don't have to force somebody, just before retire. Said, you have about a month before you retire. You sit down here and you pull every information you have and put it in CAPEX on engineering standard work, right? Then we create CAPEX, right? We need to monitor these CAPEX, how useful they are, right? And in order to see if a KPAC, which have certainly an acceptance criteria, does it meet the acceptance criteria? We are using the compliance state, right, and the usage. And it's important to see, how many times that KPAC turn up green or red in your assessment, right? If you have it more red than green, you probably have to look back in your KPAC and reassess, the quality of that of the information there. Each organization creates engineering standard work, right? I have one there, I created about 50 pages, right, about the loss motion springs, right? And, we require everybody who has a loss motion spring, right, to comply to that engineering standard work. And it's not effective, right? You can ask the best, did you read the spec? Yes, okay. Are you complying with the spec? Yes, okay. Well, can you put the evidence? Well, it's harder to put the evidence, right? So we broke that down into some key elements, right? And the KPAC there, it's a key element where, I don't know if you know a lot about compression springs, but in a case that the end of the spring doesn't move parallel, right? The life of the spring is not what you calculated to different tools, right? You have a little bit of buckling, the stress is going in with, a little different, right? It's not uniformly distributed, so you have to take a penalty in a safety factors there. So we wrote a KPAC that we extracted from that engineering standard work, right? And we have many examples about that. And then the last one, right, in its development cycle. So we are in a automotive industry. I don't know about you, but our development cycles, it's continuously shorter and shorter, right? Maybe if you work from the government, you might enjoy, the same development cycles than 5 years ago, but not for us, right? So we need to be smart about that. And we invest time in creating KPACs, but then we take the benefit that it's very easy to duplicate assessment, right? You have the KPACs, then you can roll it on the same product line, and you have, many products that are using the same KPACs, in their assessments. The other benefit that we start using is look across. So many times, we wonder, right, on acceptance criteria, well, we have this stress level here. Maybe it's a little high. So what was the stress level on that application? Well, maybe we have to call the lead engineer, which hopefully didn't retire, and and so on, and sells the library. So I don't want to be too dramatic here. But then we have the look across function, where this KPAC was used in many projects, and you can see on each project what was the result of that KPAC. Right? And then, the online monitoring, right, with conformance states, dates, issue, and so on, you know that better. Okay? So towards the end, I was reflecting, what went well and not so well about, our experience at Eaton. And this is Eaton experience, Other organizations might have it differently. So the good thing, assessments are easy. You have the KPAC, you do the assessment, no problem. Easy to propagate from one project to another, right? You clone it, right? It's easy to transfer the lesson learned, right? It's the fastest way to write a lesson learned is to KPAC and not to change the revision on engineering standard work or so on. A good way to track, accomplishments across the issues. And last one is very important, right? It drives rigor accountability, right? Those are auditable, right? You have somebody writing the KPACs, right? Somebody is doing the assessment, but then you have an approval authority who validates the assessment. Well, there are some learnings, right? And one of the learnings that we experience was what is called strive for perfections. right? And as engineers, we really want to make things very complicated, right? And in CAPEX or acceptance criteria, right, we want to cover everything that is possible or impossible, right? And that takes time. And it takes time to have the requirements on paper, and then takes time to make a method CAPEC, right, and so on. So we managed to break that down, right, to make it maybe simpler CAPEX and maybe more of them. The second, it's a human element, right? Yes, it's a new tool. Yes, you have to learn it. You might not have time in your schedule to learn it, right? So I got a tip, yesterday, right, from Caterpillar, right, to deploy, more resources, to the young engineers who want to move up in their organization, right, to the successor plan. It's a good way to learn the product, right? If you know the product and the requirements, writing the CAPEC, takes a little bit of time, but it's not rocket science. We're going to implement more on that. Thank you. And then that also addresses the number 3 there, right? You need more CAPEX and you need more authors, right, to flood the organization with that. And then the fourth one, it's on-the-job training, right? As we are working with different systems, right? We wish, we're going to have a F1 key someday in Auros, right, to pull you directly to help. But today, it's more of a on-job training, one training the other engineer. So in summary, right, we are committed to Auros, right? And we see the benefit in a design review. Right now it's in an execution mode, right? We can't stress enough, what we've seen and how they change the conversation in our meetings. We are expanding. We are expanding within Eaton, moving Auros to different sides of our organization, as well as implementing that API and smart hooks and doing Auros outside the design review. And then I think we have the strategic commitment to expand Eaton across the enterprise. So that's all, folks. I'm open to questions.
All right, we've got several questions here that have come in. We'll start with, you mentioned some of the first CAPECs you've written were not so good. How would you define a well-written CAPEC?
Yes. So first of all, when we write a CAPEC, you have authors, right? Write a CAPEC. And that stays in a working process and it's pushed for approval, right? And then the subject matter experts are approving that, right? People with a lot of experiences, and they look at that, said, maybe the technical knowledge is not correct there, right? Or maybe it's too narrow, right? Or maybe can be expanded to different cases, right? So to answer your question, if it passes the subject matter expert check, it's a good CAPEC, and we promote it to active and use it in an assessment.
Very good. How do you maintain a sustainment program with organization and design process changes such as movement from prototype, test, to CAE, etc.?
So if I understand that question correctly, right, in our product development stages, right, we move from concept all the way to production, right? So this is the process, we call it pro-launch process. Each organization might have a different with gates, right? So Auros manages, this overall process to the design review, as I mentioned in Auros. I don't know if that answered your question. If no, please ask.
Okay, and we'll jump into the next one. Do you think this design review process in Auros would be as effective if you could not flow in sponsor requirements?
Very good question, right? And what we seen at Eaton was that at the beginning, we needed the stick and a carrot. Now we don't, right? I mentioned earlier we had a three new seats project where was bottom up. We have member in our organization who said, well, I think I can do that better in Auros, right? And I was reading somewhere else that one of the speakers in the past said, that they wanted to create a lesson learn or something, and one team member said, well, I think Auros is a better tool to do that. And we've seen that there, right? We have a number of projects, the DVPNR, a set of requirements that it's pushing, everything that needs to be done in an assessment for the design review process. So those are coming from bottom up.
Perfect. How long did it take to develop the design review process used in the method KPAC?
In the method KPAC. Well, if you are talking about the master assessment, didn't took too long, right? And Jasmine did the work, right, to put the boxes in assessment, right? The KPAC is a different story, right? And we had what it's called the management tool in the design, the blue boxes there. They were questions that, they were created, most of that, about 70% of them, they were in Excel, right? We moved it to Auros. But then as we reviewed that as a committee, we come up with new questions that were not captured there, right? One of the questions is, that I like it, do you have the subject matter experts available for that project, right? Because you might have it in your organization, but they are spread thin and you don't have it. Do you have the right tools available, right? And we had some failures in the past due to the impact, and we were not used to have impact in our products. As we move to different type of products, we see more and more impact, and we find the needs, to have the impact FEA and multi-body dynamics analysis.
Okay, and the last one I'm seeing here, how do you identify those SMEs to vet knowledge?
Well, the SMEs are identified through another system at Eaton, maturity model, right? So for each competency, you have a number of SMEs across the world, right? I'm the SME for springs, that's why I put the spring example there. But we have SMEs for casting, SMEs for forging, SMEs for injection molding, and so on. So it just matters to pulling those resources in your review. And when you submit a KPAC, right, in a KPAC we have an approval group, right? It might or might not have the right SME for that KPAC, but you can add, to that group, and you can pull into the meeting.
Perfect. That's it for the questions here. Last call for, okay, we do have a question, 2. So 1, 2.
So you mentioned that there were 41 projects at Eaton that are using Auros. Can you tell us how from 1 it became 41? What were the success indicators that prompted the other projects to pick up Auros and be successful?
You are asking about which one was the first one, or?
No. How did it grow from 1 to 41? What were the success indicators that prompted other projects to pick up Auros and use as their vehicle?
Right. So as I mentioned here, rapid development after 2020. Right. So that's when we had the management buy-in, and you said that's a good tool. We see the value as a manager. You go, right? And was not necessarily forced to do it, kind of convinced to do it. And when I say convinced to do it, we had the question for the design reviews, and they were some, in an old version in Excel. And anecdotal evidence there, one group didn't want to do it. Well, we are, a few days before the design review, we don't have time to learn Auros. And the answer is, okay, answer those questions in Excel, right? And attach the evidence in Excel for every single question. And then the answer was, well, I better do it in Auros because it's easier.
So. Yeah. And then question here.
Andrew, thanks for that. It's a good story, good progress here. I'm curious what your thoughts are about, you described, and I've read your Spring standard, very detailed, a lot of information there, a lot of source for learning, but to use it for compliance measurement is difficult. And so you've created some KPIs around that for easier measurement of compliance. Do you think that as you continue to mature, that those legacy standards will be maintained or retired and replaced with Auros KPIs? Is there a benefit of just having one or maintaining both?
Yes, and that's a good question. So one day, I hope we retire the engineering standard work, right? At the point where the entire document is captured in KPIs, we probably retire the Word document. We are not there yet, right? And we didn't do the document ingester or anything, to break each chapter there. When I wrote those standards, was before Auros. Maybe now I would do it a little differently, but unfortunately, today we still maintain both.
I could see where you'd want to maintain that just from a learning perspective to teach people the gory details behind what the KPIs are reflecting. So I don't know if we've had that discussion within Eaton, but it's probably time to start talking about it.
Yeah.
Oh, Carl's got a question.
I have a question. If it's possible to go a slide forward, perhaps, maybe one more. Yes, this one. So this is a snapshot on how you're approaching a specific design review, right?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. And
Yeah,
there might be multiple of these throughout the lifetime of
That's
the program.
correct.
So stage one would be like an early conceptual design review, and what you're acknowledging here for one of the 41 projects that chose to use this is, there's a design for environment assessment, there's something with a black border, and then
Voice of the customer,
voice of the customer, and then there's a
traceability
design,
matrix, right?
I see, and then there's a design review map, and then as you progress through, you start to have different content that you're asking them.
That's correct.
So this is a snapshot of the whole entire program.
That's correct, right. So this one team board serves for a project from start to finish.
I see. So this is a simple way to get the programs to see where all the knowledge will exist in their lifetime, whether it's a couple years or more.
Right.
Okay. And the blue design review map, is that the sponsor requirements?
Well, those were kind of the vehicle group requirements, what you have to answer in a design review.
Oh, internal requirements.
Internal requirements, definitely.
Okay. Are there any boxes here for external requirements?
Well, when you say external requirements, let's say if you are meant to say external requirements like the customer,
Yes, sir.
that is part of the voice of the customer, right? What are their requirements? And then how we monitor our performance or durability to their requirements. And that's tracked with traceability matrix.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. Covered a lot. I think that concludes our session. Thank you, Andrei.
Thank you.